Great. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for allowing me to be here. It's a privilege. Just a couple of things. I was really kind of caught by one of his charts where he talked about shared goals, because what we're doing at IBM really aligns to that chart that he talked about. This thing about good stewardship, the idea about sustainable benefit for the food supply chain, and policies based on complete and correct information. That it really sums up the kind of the work that we're trying to do here around blockchain and the food supply chain. I do have a long history of working in this area. I was part of IBM Research, but prior to that, actually was a farmer in New Zealand. We had a beef farm, and so I really can appreciate how hard the business is and how important this discussion we are having today. So what I'd like to do is talk about what blockchain is. And can somebody keep track of the time for me? I didn't bring my clock here. So just
give you like a 10 or
oh yeah, just get the hook. That'd be fine. Because I could talk for 2, 3, 4 days about this. I am so passionate about it, and let me just give you a little bit of. I'm going to talk in analogies a little bit, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of my background. I've had 3 opportunities in my career to work in transformative technologies, disruptive technologies. The first one was when I got out of grad school. I joined a company called Rockwell International, and the first day in my boss pulled me into the office, and my first day at work, and he said, "I want you to do a marketing study on modems." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that's great, but what's a modem?" Anyhow, that technology and that work we did at IBM eventually led to putting modems in personal computers and computers, and as we all know, how that transformed how we do business. So that was number one. Number two is, about 12 years later, I was privileged to join the IBM Corporation and set up their sales organization for their semiconductor division. And that was where prior to that, IBM's technology in semiconductors was all internally based. But they realized that they could no longer afford to keep up that investment. So they wanted to expand out into the external business. And I was part of that, running North America. Result of that was we engaged a client in Southern California called Qualcomm. And Qualcomm at that time was making chips that went into cell phones. And the result of that alliance led to, can I borrow your smartphone for a second? That led to this device. And if we think in the last 12 years how this has transformed our lives, it's absolutely astronomical. The fact that, when we first started out, this didn't even have a camera associated with it. And today, I can download my boarding pass, I can turn the heat on in my house or the air conditioning, I can deposit a check. Who would have ever believed the transformation that this device had? And so that leads us to the discussion of blockchain. We have a technology here today that we at IBM believe is going to be equally transformative. It is going to disrupt how supply chains are managed and help people do things in a much more enlightened way. So let me just explain a few things about that. Okay, so this is how business is done today. And if you think about it, I'm going to use an analogy. Let's say in 1995, you went on vacation, and let's pick someplace exotic. Let's say we went to Thailand. And you would go out and buy a postcard and send it to your family and friends. And it'd be a one-to-one communication, just like this is how things are done today on the supply chain. It's a one-to-one communication. But it'd be costly, inefficient, and probably 90% of the time the postcard would get to that person, that family or friend, after you got home from vacation. Okay? And we think about today, you go on vacation and you go to Thailand. What do? You get a picture, you post it on social media. It's instantaneous. It's to your permission group of friends. But equally importantly, and the most important part of this, is that there's a bi-directional flow of information. With the postcard in 1995, the communication was one way. Here today, so you post something on social media, your friends, your family can post something back, hey, I was in Thailand last month, go check this out. And that's what we're proposing here, is a instantaneous communication to your permission group of people. But the important piece here, and where the business value is this bi-directional flow of information. For the first time, people can send information both directions. And what makes this work, and it's this whole thing about immutability, the thing that you can actually trust the data. The thing that's holding us up is the fact that up until now, there is, with this technology, we can actually trust and verify the data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one thing that we really want to make clear here is that this is not a Bitcoin blockchain we're talking about. We're talking about a blockchain that was specifically developed by our researchers and the community that is built for the enterprise. And there's significant difference with that. You know, the blockchain that we're talking about, a blockchain built for the enterprise, has all the requirements that are required for the enterprise. Things like scalability, security, redundancy. All those things are part of the blockchain. So when you hear about blockchain, just realize that not all blockchains are created equal. Yes, there's a need for the Bitcoin blockchain, but there's also a need for the blockchain for the enterprise. Now, this chart here just talks about some of the activities that we are doing at IBM. And this is not meant to be a talk about, an endorsement or sales pitch about IBM. What this talk is to talk about is how blockchain is going to influence supply chains. And when we think about this, we look at the supply chain in the U.S. It's very clear that the supply chain is enormously inefficient. The fact that we waste 40% of the food that's produced and grown in this country indicates that the supply chain is totally inefficient. And the fact is, if we can reduce that and make the supply chain more efficient, everybody wins. And when we look at an industry with the low margins that we have, there is a desperate need to, transfer that wealth to the people who are really doing the hard work. And that's what we're proposing here. So these are just some of the initiatives that we have on blockchain. But let me talk to you about the important parts of why these are right now siloed and how they start connecting. When we think about food safety or the food supply chain, it's enormously complex. It involves things like pathogen growth, spoilage, economic adulteration, and then compliance issues, and then this whole sharing of information with regard to regulatory issues. And so we have over 100 researchers working just on this particular segment. But the other segments, we have a number of people working on it. And for instance, our supply chain and logistics piece on the left-hand side, the bottom left-hand side, is a way that we're digitizing all sea containers and putting that information up on the blockchain. And our work in trade finance is another area in which we've been working with all the big banks for a number of years now, about two years now. But let me share with you how these things start connecting. You're running a factory, let's say you're making chocolate bars in Thailand, and you notice some cacao has come into your business and there's been some economic adulteration or food spoilage with that. Well, you reject that shipment. Well, that becomes a supply chain and logistics problem because you have to get the cacao from someplace else. And then it also becomes a trade finance problem or issue because you don't want to pay for that ingredient that you just got. So think of these blockchains as starting to interact and communicate with each other in a seamless way. And what's really exciting about that is that in the 5 to 7 to 10 year horizon, we really believe that you can almost have a lights out approach to supply chain planning, all the way from the seed to the farm to the consumer. And people look at me and say, well, how's that possible? Well, we're almost there with self-driving cars, which is a really hard problem, right? So why can't we do that, have that same goal here, and really making supply chains that are really efficient and serve this whole idea of these shared goals where we can trust the data and actually, really provide a benefit for society. So, let me talk a little bit about this chart and why we are so passionate about it. We look at the bottom two the boxes there. The idea here is that when we first started working on this and we looked at blockchain, cryptocurrency blockchain, we realized that, as I said, it needed to be built for the enterprise. But one of the things about the enterprise is you need to have a platform that is open source. So we worked with the Linux Foundation, developed this Hyperledger fabric with the Linux Foundation, and then we layered the requirements in the IBM blockchain platform, all the requirements necessary for the enterprise, the redundancy and scalability. So think of these blocks, those two bottom blocks, as this platform here, this smartphone. And what do you do with your smartphone? You click on it, you go to the App Store, and you download apps. And that's the premise on the top part of the chart, is that you will layer applications on there. You will go into the store, the IBM store or another store, and you will layer applications onto this platform. The first applications that we have are the ones at the top there, the trace and recall, which actually traces all the way from the seed to the farm to the table, and certificate managements, where you load up your certificates, whether they be compliance certificates, bill of ladings, whatever that may be, and data access and entry. But as we migrate through time, think about this. When this first came out, there were relatively few applications associated with it. And today there's, gazillion applications. And the same thing will happen here, is that we will be able to layer on information and applications that deliver information in a trusted information to the people who need to have that information, to help them make more enlightened decisions and help them be more proactive than reactive. The other piece of this that is really important, as I've talked about, is from seed to farm to table. The idea is that the consumer is demanding this information. And we look at the next generation coming forward, the Generation Z. They think differently. They use this technology. They were brought up with this technology. And we believe at IBM, and our demographic studies have shown, that the consumer, the next generation consumer, is going to absolutely demand to know the provenance of things. So the provenance of this chicken or the provenance of this beef. And we believe very, very strongly that this technology can provide that provenance, that it can ensure the consumer that this product that they're buying, this animal protein or produce or whatever it is, or wine, if it's organic or it's non-GMO, whatever the characteristics are, we can provide that to the consumer. And for people who embrace the technology, we believe, and we have clients doing this today, not only with Walmart, but Carrefour in Europe, and a number of other clients where they're using the technology to prove the provenance and actually gain market share and charge a premium for that product. And we have clients, throughout the world, whether it's the government of Vietnam, in Thailand, in Russia. We have clients operating and using the technology in that way. So this idea of proving the provenance. Now, with regard to, how this relates to, the discussion we're having today here, we really believe that there is an enormous amount of work that needs to be done in how we transmit and deliver information is to the people in a network that have the information that they need, whether that be information with regard to antibiotic resistance or genomic information. There are people in the supply chain who need that information, and they need it instantaneously so that they can make a decision, an informed decision. And we believe that this will be the platform of choice. That's not to say that there is an enormous amount of work that needs to be done to develop the applications that sit on this top layer that deliver that information to the people who need it. But this is an opportunity for really us all to collaborate and work together and transform how we're doing and managing this flow of information. It's a big data problem. We are a big data company. We're not a food company. So we really need to partner and collaborate with people who have knowledge in the space and understand what information is available, what needs to be delivered, and to whom it needs to be delivered.